Policy Committee. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome some of our new members to today's committee and just remind everyone that this is the beginning of the new municipal year. The meeting today is open to the public and there are no items that are exempt. I've got exempt information in today. The meeting will be webcast and the recording will also be available to watch back on the council website. It could be possible that Sheffield Live may record and rebroadcast the meeting. We've received no public questions or statements to this meeting. And please can I request that all mobile phones and such devices are switched to silent as not to disturb the meeting. Thank you. There's no fire test planned for today, so if you do hear the fire alarm, please follow council officers out of the building and assemble in Tudor Square. I'd like to ask members now to introduce themselves, so I'm going to go this way, and if you could introduce yourselves, that would be great. Thank you.
Good afternoon, my name is Glynis Chapman, I'm a councillor from Osborough Ward and I'm a substitute for Richard Williams.
Good afternoon, my name is Councillor Gail Smith and I am also a Mosborough Ward councillor.
Good afternoon, I'm Anne Whittaker, I'm councillor for West Ecclesfield Ward and I'm Lib Dem Group spokesperson for this committee.
Good afternoon, I'm Councillor Toby Manson, I'm Group spokesperson. I'm Deputy Chair, sorry, I get there eventually. Deputy Chair and Green Party, for the Green Party, and also Hillsborough Ward Councillor.
Good afternoon, I'm Councillor Malachi Habe for Brumhill and Sharrow Vale.
Hi, I'm Mia Drazic, Councillor for Park and Aberthorn.
Hello, Rob Bannister, Councillor for Grays Park.
Nigat Bashara, Councillor for Netheridge and Sharrow Ward.
And I'm Councillor Dondale, Councillor for Shire Green and Brightside and Chair of this committee. Do we have any apologies for absence, please, Rachel?
We do, Chair. We have an apology of absence from Councillor Richard Williams. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As I said before, there are no items that contain exempt information on today's agenda. Could I ask whether any members wish to declare an interest in any of the items of business on the agenda today? No. Thank you very much. I'd like to take everyone to page 13 of your papers to the minutes from the previous meeting. Could I ask members that were present at that meeting if they agree that the minutes are a true record of the previous meeting? Thank you. Lots of nods. That's agreed. Thank you very much. Thank you. We have no public petitions, questions or statements today and we don't have any members' questions either, which takes us nicely onto agenda item number 7, which is the work programme on page 23 of your agenda pack, and Rachel is going to talk us through the work programme. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Chair has just highlighted, the work programme begins on page 23 of the agenda pack. There are some recommendations outlined on page 24, recommendations 1 and 2 that we will be asking the committee to agree today. Under section 4, which has proposed additions and amendments to the work programme since the last meeting, because this is the start of a new municipal year, you will be able to see all the new additions actually added within Appendix 1, where you can see all forthcoming meetings. So you can look through there. I'm sure you've had time to peruse those, but that's obviously what's set out for the rest of the year. So after this meeting, any further proposed additions and amendments will be highlighted in section 4 that are different from what the lookout is now, basically. If you want to leaf or scroll, depending on whether you're looking on the laptop or you've got a hard copy, to page 29, that's where Appendix 1 begins, and that is where the work programme is laid out and what is set out for each meeting. That is now for your discussion. As a committee, you can shape this work programme, you can add suggestions, and I will pass back to Chair for that to happen. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rachel. Just on the back of what Rachel suggested today, I do believe that Kelly has sent out an email to all committee members We will be working on this together on the work programme. This is a working document, so it's not static, and we can add things on throughout the year as we go along. All members have been asked for proposed dates for us to be able to have a working session together, because this is a real collaborative approach. We need to make sure that we are all working together on the work programme. It's really important. And as I said, we can add things. If for any reason people can't get to the session where we're going to be doing the work programme, if you have got things you think we need on this programme, please send them via email as well, so that we can discuss that with officers to make sure it's on the work programme. It's really important that we get things on, if that's okay. Thank you very much. Any questions or comments on it today? Because it's pretty, I'm just mindful it doesn't look like we've got a lot on, but there's so much to talk about, and we need to get it into the working group session so that we can get it on the work programme. So does anyone have anything they'd like to add today, or are you happy for us to take this into the working group? Yeah. Thank you very much for that. Thank you. So that now brings us on to item number 8, which is the Strategic Director of Children's Services update, and that is Meredith who's going to be giving us this, and it's on page 33 of your agenda pack. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The role of Strategic Director of Children's Services is a statutory role, as is the lead member for Children's Services. So part of the reason for presenting this report is to meet those requirements. The information around the statutory guidance is a link within the document as well, which might be helpful for members to look at. There's considerable amount of work taking place across children's around transformation. That's headlined in the first part of the report, and the key areas that we are looking at and developing and changing. Much of that is in work in partnership across the city with a range of different organisations. Some of that is about how we do things and how we operate within Sheffield City Council and as officers. And throughout the coming year, information about those areas of transformation will be coming through to committee as well, and some have already come through in the previous municipal year. We know that one of the key areas of work that we need to improve is around our education, health and care plans, the quality of those plans, and also the way that they are responsive and informing how we ensure outcomes are improved for our children and young people who require an education, health and care plan. We are looking to bring an action plan back to committee in September, setting out what is happening around that. Some of that will be within our own teams. Much of it will be a partnership approach through the local area partnership, which obviously includes the ICB, Sheffield Children's Hospital, our schools as represented through Learn Sheffield, and also importantly Parent Carer Forum, and also the voice of our children and young people. That also links into the work that we're undertaking as a local area partnership around neurodiversity. We know that as there is nationally, there are issues around children waiting for diagnosis for both autism and ADHD. We know that as a city we need to do things radically different. The senior leaders across the city have been meeting for a period of 6 months, really teasing out what we can do differently, how we can work together. That also includes Parent Carer Forum. I'm pleased to point to James, who is his second day, but he is leading that work to support the city around transforming how we work in that area, and is a triple funded post by Sheffield City Council, the ICB, and Sheffield Children's Hospital to really make sure that we are moving fast and addressing issues of both children waiting for diagnosis, what happens when children are in school and how we're supporting them, and also how we can potentially do things differently as well. And again, that will be further information coming through in the autumn to committee. The other areas, and I've missed out attendance, that's really good news around attendance and the changes and improvements for our children and young people, making sure that they are in school and learning. We still have work to do in that area, but that uptick is really strong and powerful for us as a city. Again, I would commend to you Learn Sheffield and their analysis, which shows that link between being in school and attaining and attending, and the real difference that makes when children are not in school for considerable amounts of time, and how, again, as a city and as a partnership, we are working together to make sure that we are working to address that need, because we know children being in school means that they are likely to attain, and therefore we can reduce our number of children not in education, employment and training, as well as ensuring that our young people can fly as well and become independent adults for our city. There is some really good news around our test and learn and grow. We were one of only 4 places to be identified by Cabinet Office to be a pilot around test and learn and grow. For us, it was around family hubs, a really significant piece of work which saw an increase in the number of parents attending real classes, sessions with their children, an uptake of 24%, which is really strong and powerful. And again, is something that we are, the link is there on the paper, but again, is something we want to bring to you as committee members, because of that powerfulness of a different way of doing things, a different way of learning, and how we embed that in other areas of our work, as well as recognising the really strong work that our Family Hubs teams undertook to work with Cabinet Office, with Nesta, with MHCLG to impact on our children and our families and our local communities. We commit to give information about academies and academisation, and that is set out. I have an apology to make. We still have within here a conversion programme. That's the terminology used by the DFE, so it is the DFE Academy Conversion Programme, which is given information about within the paper. I'm happy to take questions. There is much work taking place across the city and across our officer team to improve outcomes for children and young people. We have in some areas a long journey to go. In other areas we can really celebrate the success of what is happening and how it is impacting on our children and young people. Thank you.
Thank you, Meredith. People have got, I've seen some hands. I just have a comment and a question. Nesta and MCLG, what is that? Because I'm just mindful, not everyone understands the acronym. I don't.
Do you want me to do that now?
Yes, please.
So Nesta is an organisation which is a think tank organisation which is commissioned by the government, and they have supported around understanding the data and how to use data and how to undertake test and learn. MHCLG is the local government department, the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. I may have that in the wrong order, but there's the words are right.
Thank you, Meredith. It's just for anyone watching, so that we can kind of make sense of things. And just one final thing for me, and then I'll bring Councillor Mallinson in and anyone else. I was going to, under the work programme, I was going to ask that we do have the EHCPs and neurodiversity to ensure that's on the work programme. It's good to know that that will be coming in the autumn. Can I ask if the other partners that are part of that local area partnership will be present at that, because this is not just a council piece of work, it is an opportunity for them to come as well and tell us what they're doing.
Yes, and actually in the SEND manifesto, which is part of this committee meeting, there will be representatives from partners, but that will absolutely become a common practice for us, for partners, for the local area partnership to be represented in all of the conversations around special educational needs and disability.
Thank you. Councillor Mallinson.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to give a bit of praise for a couple of things and the question about something else. The Test Learn and Grow sounds absolutely amazing. What I love about it is that it's talking to frontline staff and service users, who often are people who really do know how to do things properly. So that's a really good initiative. The neurodiversity initiative, I think, is really important, and it ties in with the all-age autism strategy, hopefully, and our interactions with the adult social care committee. So I'm looking forward to the work on that. And then finally, just the thing about the attendance, obviously really good news. And nobody's knows, I said this in the briefing, I'm concerned about the last sentence in that section. It's on page 36, where it says, DfE has been clear of head teachers they must not authorise leave for the purposes of holidays, leisure or recreation, regardless of the family circumstances, SEND needs or financial reasons. I think the Green Party opinion would be that that is overly harsh and doesn't cater for significant circumstances where people may have compelling reasons to take their child out of school in term time. So maybe a consideration in future of putting something in there. However, it is still down to head teacher's discretion or something, would be a useful addition at some, in future reports. Thank you.
So it is DfE statutory guidance is the must. Our head teachers do have discretion, and so their judgment is based on their knowledge of family, of children, and so that is also within the work that takes place around attendance and attending school, and potential penalties as well for parents. Around Learn, Test and Grow, I think I've just made up 3 words in different order again. It is really profound, the work that's taken place. So members of the community have been asked to create WhatsApp groups in their own language to encourage attendance from families from that community, which has seen a real uptick. So absolutely agree that use of our frontline staff really understanding the people that they're working with and the people themselves, providing that link through to families has had a really huge impact on take-up in that family hub. So it is something we can really learn from.
Thank you, Meredith. I think just in support of what Councillor Mallinson said, while we all know that attendance is absolutely imperative to our children and young people's development, and missing time from school has lots of implications for children and young people's learning and social experiences, I feel that we need some clarity for members, and I know we've discussed this. As members, we do get, I get emails from parents who have particular circumstances which require them to take time out of school during term time, and I think if we could have something for members to understand the DfE's line on this, but where there's an authority, where we don't really have the influence to be able to stop schools or head teachers from making those decisions. I think if we could have something for all members, just so if we are approached by parents, that would setting out the guidelines and setting out the responsibilities, that would be really, really helpful, because there are circumstances where families do need to take their children out of school during term time, unfortunately. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. I'd like to ask a question on 1.3, neurodiversity, and the amount of referrals that have got even larger within the last 12 months. Can you give us an update on I worry about this, and parents and children that are getting to the end of this year, school year, and still haven't had a referral. Can you give us an update on that? Not perhaps now, but I'd like that information if possible.
So more than happy. I think that the September information will give you that whole partnership approach and the plan of what is taking place. and how we are looking to address issues, including whether we are creating our own barriers for children and families by saying that you need to have a neurodiversity diagnosis to access a service. So all of that work is currently taking place so that we are removing some of those barriers so that we can support people waiting for diagnosis, as well as working to find ways to increase diagnosis, increase how many children are seen and how quickly, and that, we'll bring that to you in September, a fully comprehensive information.
Thank you, Meredith. Any further questions for Meredith on this part of the report? No. Thank you for that, Meredith. We now move on to agenda item number 9, which is update. Are we all happy with Meredith's report and the recommendation? Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. Item number 9, which is update on school services, team priorities and impact. And Pat and the team are coming up to speak on that, I believe. There are some name tags on the name plates on the desk. If you could pop your names up and remove them when you finish speaking. And can I just ask, when you finish speaking, to turn your microphones off? Thank you. Can we get somebody to switch that microphone on, please? And yeah, if you just introduce yourselves when you speak, thank you. We'll get round to you now.
Music education by the Sheffield Music Service and the Music Hub Partnership in Sheffield.
I'm James Smith and I lead the EAL New Rights.
Thank you, colleagues. So, Chair, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to introduce this report. I'm pleased to bring forward an update on the work and impact
We're just going to take a moment for anyone watching because we've got some technical difficulties.
I think on camera I now will be Rachel Marshall, but my name is Pat Buttrell, Assistant Director, School Effectiveness. Chair, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to introduce this report. I'm pleased to bring forward an update on the work and impact of our school services team, a dedicated group of professionals delivering music, physical education and swimming, outdoor learning, educational visits, enrichment through the Children's University and targeted support for pupils with English as an additional language. At the heart of this work is a shared mission to support vulnerable learners and to provide inclusive, enriching experiences that help all children in Sheffield thrive, not only academically, but in terms of confidence, well-being and a strong sense of belonging. Over the past year, 5,500 children took part in whole class instrumental music lessons. 94% of Sheffield schools engaged with the music hubs. More than 4,000 pupils accessed outdoor learning activity at Thornbridge Outdoors. Apparently even higher than this at the moment, over 50,000 children have now logged enrichment hours with the Children's University and well over 5 million hours have been recorded in total since its inception. The EEL and New Arrivals team introduced the new dual language assessments that are helping schools better support multilingual learners and reduce misdiagnosis of special educational needs and disabilities. And school swimming outcomes have surpassed pre-pandemic levels, supported by a progressive, inclusive curriculum and CPD for all teachers. This report sets out our strategic priorities for the next 12 to 18 months, growing support for the most vulnerable learners, deepening collaboration with SEND and Children's Services, strengthening our use of data to measure impact, and embedding inclusive practice across all offers. All of this work is rooted in Sheffield's belonging strategy and contributes to our city goals for thriving communities, inclusive education, and a strong foundation for every child's future. We're proud of what we've achieved so far and ambitious about what lies ahead. I hope this report gives you the committee the confidence in both the value and direction of this work. Thank you. We are very happy to take questions.
Thank you, Pat. Councillor Whittaker.
This is clearly lots of wonderful work going on, and I think it is so incredibly valuable. Things like the outdoors, where it's Thornbridge Outdoors. Recently my son accompanied my granddaughter who has type 1 diabetes, and he had to actually go on the residential visit with her because school didn't have anyone looked after. And he at first thought this was going to be a pain, you know, but he came back having had an amazing time. And he said just spending time with the children, seeing what they got out of it was just amazing for him to have the opportunity to do that. I think we discussed at the briefing that if you say to anybody about school services, it clearly does not. I mean, I didn't think it was all this until obviously I knew. It needs a much better title, and I think I know we're sort of saying it, you know, tongue in cheek, but I think something needs to be done. That it's not just school services, because that to me says dinners and things like that. It does not say all these wonderful activities that children can get involved in. And I think you can see without a shadow of a doubt how it fits into the belonging framework and how all these activities will make children feel like they belong. And I think that's really important. So it's brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think you're working again, are you? You're having some terrible technique. Oh, yes, you are, Pat. And then I'd like to just make a comment.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I'm sure Emma will respond directly to the Thornbridge positive comments there as well. I don't think that term school services does us justice. We are looking at using terms like enrichment as something that describes ourselves better. Please watch this space on a more positive and accurate description of the service. Emma, do you want to?
Yeah, I was just going to say thanks. We really try hard to make our service at Thornbridge really inclusive, well, across all of our services we do. And that's one of the things we pride ourselves on, that if a child needs parental support to be involved alongside their peers, we can make it happen. We just need some notice, and we can definitely make those things happen. So yeah, thanks very much. I'm really glad to hear that it was a positive experience.
Thank you. On the back of, I'll bring up Councillor Mallinson in as well. On the back of good experiences, I mean, over the last few years, I've had fantastic opportunities to go to Sheffield Music School and go to the Children's University celebrations. And I think all of these things are happening. We don't celebrate them enough. We don't shout about them. And I think if there's any opportunity for any of us that are on this committee to go to, I get invited to Children's University Awards, so I'd happily extend those invitations out to Sheffield Music School, I think to Thornbridge, everything that we can go and see, because when we sit and make decisions about things and have conversations with officers, it can sometimes feel a little bit remote because we've not actually been and seen it. So I think if we can get some visits organised for members to go out and see things, that would be really nice. Thank you. Emma?
I was just going to say, if you ever want to have one of your pre-meetings out at Thornbridge, we have space and we've got all the mod cons. So yeah, please come out and see us. We would love that, and we could even do like a walk and talk thing for you all if you wanted to, where we could have a look around. Meredith's team came out a few months back now to have a look around, and it's a lovely site, and yeah, you're welcome.
I'm feeling a little bit of an education, children and families team building day at Thornbridge.
Booked.
Councillor Mallinson, did you have a comment?
Sounds a great idea. Two parts of what I'm going to say. Firstly, I haven't got direct experience of all the services, but I'm deeply impressed with all of them. And the one I have got experience of is the Music Hub, and the heroic efforts to keep music in Sheffield over the years have been tremendous. You know, because with austerity, it could so easily have completely disappeared. So I want to thank Ian in particular for the incredible effort that's been put in there. The questions I've got really are, these are all, and just nod if I'm correct, these are all brought-in services by schools, are they? Yeah. So schools are paying out of their own budgets for these. Not all schools are either able to afford or do engage. All the teachers, specialist teachers, are employed by the service to deliver using the money that the schools are paying in. And this is just a political statement really, but you know, one day maybe we'll have an education service which gives that to every child, and not for you, I think you do fantastically. But you know, there are many kids who need some English who don't have access, and that's a terrible thing. It would be useful in this report to have some indication data on, and I appreciate, I'm not going to ask for it now, some data on the access of children, you know, what percentage you're reaching, and maybe even what sort of demographics. I mean, I don't want to give tons of work, but I think that would be really useful in this sort of report for us to see how it's reaching into the communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marlinson. The level of funding is slightly complicated depending on which service. So Emma's service, for instance, is a fully traded service. Ian is partly grant funded through the Arts Council, if I'm correctly. The Children's University is mostly traded, although there is some money out of DSG, General Cash Fund, but also I think by hook or by crook they're very kind of entrepreneurial in the way that they kind of look at raising funds. And I'm just checking the EAL service. So again, it's a traded service, but there is a large chunk of DSG going into that. So the accessibility for people across this is kind of broadened by some of this fund here as well. Thank you. And on the data, yes, we absolutely agree. Within the report, our suggestions for where we go for the next 18 months look at actually getting good, clear, accurate data, not only to track who we're working with and kind of doing the positive stuff with, but how then we target the more vulnerable and SEND learners across the city. So that is part of the action plan going forwards as well.
Thank you, Pat. Any more questions or comments on this report? No. So the recommendations are that we note the achievements and contributions of Sheffield School Services team, soon to be renamed, to inclusion and enrichment in Sheffield schools, and to endorse the outline of strategic priorities for 25-26. Are we all in agreement? Thank you very much. That brings us on nicely to agenda item number 10, which is See It, Be It in Sheffield, and I believe we've got Richard Smith and Cheryl Plant coming to present this. If you can find your name plates and pop them on, that'd be great. Thank you. For members, it's on page 65. Thank you. If you'd like to start.
I think that's working, isn't it? So thank you for having us today. Thank you, Chair. My name is Richard Smith. I'm the Head of Lifelong Learning and Skills. Apologies, I didn't get my title through in time, so it's slightly wrong on there. But and our service, Lifelong Learning and Skills, is all about progression towards adulthood. It's about moving people from schools, age provision, into post-16 and ultimately into employment. And I'm joined today by my colleague, Cheryl. Do you want to introduce yourself as well?
So my name's Cheryl Plant. I'm Pathways and Progressions Manager, and I head up the See It Be It in Sheffield campaign.
So we've just talked a few minutes ago what's in the name. I think See It Be It hopefully speaks for itself, and we're here today to talk to you about the See It Be It in Sheffield campaign and the work that's been happening over, well, since 2018 actually, when the See It Be It in Sheffield campaign launched, and the work that's been happening more recently, and we're looking ahead into work to come. We have got some slides to show you today because we felt that it's quite a visual, well, it's a visual aid, but the programme itself lends itself to seeing some of the work that's happening. I'm going to hand over to Cheryl, who leads the team, to take us through the slides, which, by the way, they follow the same pattern as the report, so it will be the report you've read.
Thank you, Richard. So, as Richard mentioned, See It Be It has been in existence since 2018, and it was originally born as a brand in recognition that there were lots of careers activities that were happening in the Sheffield that were almost in conflict and causing confusion across the city, and so creating a single umbrella brand for us to be able to bring together all the different activities around careers has really been beneficial for us. Let me take you on a bit of a journey around See It Be It. So, as the aspiration of bringing all those things together under one single brand is that we create an enterprise pipeline for young people in the city. We know that careers conversations need to start as early as possible for young people, particularly at primary phase, where we know that young people at ages 6 to 8 start to see their careers based on gender stereotypes. So it's really important that we work with them at that stage to try and challenge some of those stereotypes. But then ages 9 to 13, young people start to see their social value in terms of what they're seeing around them. And for young people in areas where there are fewer opportunities, we know that we really need to offer additional help in helping young people to really open and raise their aspirations. We work with every secondary school in the city, and we offer every child through that mechanism a chance to have 4 or more meaningful employer encounters. That's really important from a research perspective because research tells us that just 4 chances of having a two-way conversation with an employer can reduce the potential of a young person becoming NEET by 5 times, 86%. So this is actually a preventative method for NEETs as much as it is an aspiration piece. Again, we recognise whilst we support every secondary school in the city, we offer an enhanced package of support to schools in areas of high deprivation and low social mobility, and in our special schools too. I'll take you through that in a little bit more detail later. And we don't stop the journey there. Post-16, the final connector into employment, connecting young people as part of their technical and vocational education, a focus on level 2 and below is particularly embedded across our partnership work with the college and Longley Park and others, as well as outreach to those young people and not in education, employment and training through our youth hubs. And I described earlier an employer encounter, so you might be wondering what an employer encounter is. We explain it as a chance for a young person to learn directly from an employer what the world of work is like, how to access it and how to thrive in it. And there are lots of different ways that we can deliver these employer encounters. So if you haven't been into one of the schools in your constituency recently and you'd like to, I'm sure that we can make that happen. But please do find out more and get involved. But chances for young people to guess my job and connect their curriculum to work-based projects and the world of work, work experience, mock interviews is another key area where young people get some significant support in helping with their progression. And as we arrived in this room earlier, I don't know if anybody else had the benefit of meeting a group of, I think, around 15 young people from Sheffield Springs Academy that were here on a visit. So it was really great to see some young people in here earlier doing just that, finding out how to see it and be it. So these are examples of how we operate from primary through to post-16. At primary phase, we've done a full academic year of work across 28 primary schools where we've offered continuous professional development packages of support to leaders in those 28 primary schools. We've connected in employers into those settings to help with challenging some of those gender stereotypes with some of the activities that I just mentioned on the slide previous. But we also arranged for 500 young people from across those 28 schools to go to Magna back in March to take part in a Skills Street event where there was a human library experience, and the young people were rotated around a whole host of different employers, got a chance to find out about Vulcan to the Sky, meeting lots of different employers at the Get Up to Speed event as well. So we're really setting the stall in terms of how we shape conversations from the earliest possible point. At secondary phase, we've been really honoured and privileged to have the benefit of the support of backing from the Pride of Place board in Sheffield, which is led by Business in the Community. It's a business-led partnership that aims to address some of our societal challenges. It was established in October 23, and the first campaign that they realised they wanted to support was See It, Be It. And as a result of that support, we had a joint event in the Winter Gardens last June, where around 240 employers came along to find out not just about Pride of Place, but how they could get involved in See It, Be It. So this academic year, we've spent a lot of time mobilising those pledges from businesses across all of our different settings. And this feeds into the enhanced package of support that I mentioned earlier. So one of the appendices that we submitted was an assessment of how we arrived at the decisions as to which schools would benefit most from the packages of support. This is a summary you'll be able to see there. We have the mainstream secondary schools on the left, but we also have every one of our secondary SEND specialist schools there, in recognition that there's often some fantastic talent in all of those settings that is often overlooked, and this is a really brilliant chance to connect some fabulous employers through to some of the young people that might not have had those opportunities previously. I will just give a plug for the Pride of Place board. The See It Be It was its first campaign. Its next campaign is about opening doors, inclusive employment, and they have a flagship event on the 26th of June. There's details in your report on how to access that if that's of interest. We're not busy enough doing those things, so we also run a number of programmes too. So we also run something called the Big Challenge, which I'll come back to shortly. The Better Learners, Better Workers programme, which has been in effect for 14 years and began as a partnership with the company of Cutlers to address skills shortages in key sectors. That's a mentoring and employer experience programme across an academic year. And our Big Community Challenge, which is recognition of the social action that young people take and recognising the skills that they've developed as a result of that. We do have a celebration event on the 9th of July, I think it is. You'd be very welcome to come along to that, to meet some of the brilliant young people that get involved there. I said I'd come back to the Big Challenge for a special reason, that it's now in its 18th year of operation. Sheffield is one of the only areas in this country that offers this kind of initiative to young people in education, and it's offered to schools for free. We've had 108 teams enter this year, which was around 600 young people from 17 schools. We have businesses supporting along the way, in addition to providing sponsorship for a really brilliant evening that we had on at the end of April this year. So it's the idea of the Big Challenge. Young people come up with an idea, we lend them £25, which in theory we were supposed to get that back. Quite often we do, sometimes we don't. And we encourage them to take their idea to market and then tell us how they got on. So that it really starts that early thinking for a young person about understanding how businesses work and how their skills might be useful for them in the world of work in the future. And we're just about to launch on the 23rd of June something called Sector Safari. We have worked in partnership with the town centre team and we are working with 30 businesses for them to open their doors to any young person, family, adult that's interested in finding out more about the careers that are available in our high streets in the city centre. So this is effectively a careers trail. You'll be able to collect a booklet from different places, follow the booklet, scan the QR codes at the different places, find out about the different types of jobs and careers that are there. And for a Brucey bonus, you also get an enamel pin badge for completing it. So I'd encourage you to, if you talked about doing a team activity, maybe that's something that you'd like to consider. But we're really excited to see how this goes. And again, flagship for Sheffield nationally around this. Just to sing our own praises, we have been shortlisted for a number of awards. Sadly, didn't secure them, but to get that national recognition for some of the work that we're doing in making a difference to young people in Sheffield has been absolutely fantastic. In terms of what's next, the Gatsby Foundation, which created the underpinning principles of career strategy across secondary schools, is looking to do a good practice visit to the city in July. Aviva and business in the community are also in discussion with us about how they can replicate See It Be It across 16 other places in the UK. The government has just announced the reintroduction of mandatory work experience across secondary phase education, and that's going to be huge for us as a city in terms of how we support schools in that challenge, but also how we connect employers through to that, and we believe that that is something that See It Be It should be able to support with going forward. And developing a 5-year plan and sustainability strategy is key to us in terms of how we operate. We're very much externally funded, and I think there are other ways in which that we could secure sustainability. So I think there's one of the priorities that we'll be looking at. Finally, just a call to action of opportunity to find out more. Oasis Don Valley have got a business breakfast taking place in July. It'd be great to see you there. And if you want to see if your local school is offering any chances for you to go in, you can either scan the QR code, follow the link in your reports, and it'll take you to our live opportunities section to give you an idea of what your schools are doing in your areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Absolutely fascinating. What I would just like to say is I have had the opportunity previously, not more recently, of actually going into a primary school for a careers day. And what I would just like to point out is children are born with aspiration and they're born with ambition. It just gets lost on the way because of everything that goes on. They kind of get it beat out of them really a little bit with system, and I think this is really important. When I went into a primary school, we'd got astronauts, we'd got doctors, and this was in an area where you probably wouldn't think that people would be considering being a doctor and a nurse and an astronaut and a scientist. We've got lots of footballers as well, and lots of dancers and all that sort of stuff, all that creativity going on in the room. But, you know, I was looking at kind of like year 4, 5, and they were ambitious and they were aspirational. And this appears to be a tool to be able to keep that harnessed in our young people so they don't forget that ambition they have when they're little, and that these things are possible. So thank you for that. This is really good. I think Councillor Whittaker had her hand up for this one as well, and then Councillor Basharat.
Well, first of all, lots of congratulations are in order, and I think it's excellent that you've been put forward for an award. Clearly the enthusiasm comes across, Cheryl, as you're talking. I can see your enthusiasm, which is brilliant, and I think on this committee a lot, we now see a lot of council officers who are full of enthusiasm about the work that they're doing, which is absolutely fantastic. I know it mentioned on the slides about the work with primary schools, but I'm still having difficult. I can certainly see what's happening in secondary schools, and I think careers things have always happened in secondary schools, but I can't actually see what it looks like in a primary school. I think Councillor Dell is right that young children, and quite often very young children, have this idea of what they want to be when they're grown up. I run a play group, and some of our 3- and 4-year-olds know exactly what they want to be. You know, they want to be a vet, or they want to drive a bus, or they know exactly what they want to be. Or, as one little girl wants to be a mummy. But, you know, so they know exactly what they want to be. And so I suppose, as Councillor Dad says, it gets lost along the way and they lose those aspirations. But I think this is an excellent piece of work. So what does it look like in those 28 primary schools?
Thank you. It's very much led by the organisation that we're working with. Good Careers Guidance has to form a core part of the wider curriculum. And so I mentioned in the work that we're doing with the primary schools, it's actually training the staff through CPD activities around what good careers looks like at primary school and how that forms part of a wider curriculum, so that layering of information is drip fed over a period of time as opposed to just being a one-off intervention. So there's been activities that are specifically with young people, looking at science activities and bringing those to life, and then thinking about the careers that might open the doors for. We talked about gender stereotypes as part of that group, so we had a male nurse come in and talk to some young people, and a lady that works in a digital tech company come in and talking about her work in the digital field. So mindful of how young people grow and develop at the different ages and stages, I think is critical, but also how it fits as part of a wider curriculum. There's lots of different examples as to how that's applied, and I'd be more than happy to share with you some examples and case studies if you'd find that useful.
Can I just add, you know, you're talking about the groups where they get given £25. I'd be quite interesting just to have a few stories on that what did groups do with that £25 and what was the outcome and was it successful and all those things, just out of interest really. Not lots of them, just one or two. Thank you.
Happy to share that. And just to say that young people are savage business people, and I think our future is secure in terms of future leaders and innovators. So.
Thank you. Councillor Basharat.
Thank you. Exactly same what I'm just going to echo. I'm really, really pleased. I mean, I've heard about the what is it again? This initiative, and I think just today with all the depth of presentation, it addresses, I think, a lot of the challenges and the things we've been talking throughout the committee meetings and what we hear out there in terms of belonging, framework and everything. I really just want to say, you know, well done on pushing this through and the way you've put each piece and targeting, you know, those areas where our young people really need that support. My only question was, maybe you've already, it's already there in terms of how you involve in the parents, especially it was good to hear, you know, the challenge in the stereotypes. And as Dawn and everyone else said, you know, our young people, when we're out there, they're full of, you know, ideas, ambitions and everything. And sometimes they just need that continued guidance and support. And I see this as a tool that as soon as, and at the right place as well, in the school, and, you know, getting that guidance straight away and being able to prepare them for the real world when we get out there. I just going to say it's a wow for me from what I'm seeing, and addressing some of the gaps and the challenges our families and young people are facing at the moment. Fully support it. I just wanted to know how you're engaging the parents, because I think that's just as important part and parcel of this.
Thank you. I completely agree with you. We know that parents, carers generally are the biggest influencers of a young person's aspirations and careers choices. And we want to be able to work alongside parents as much as possible. The current modelling of CEP is very much focused on children and young people throughout their education stages, but we have been in talks with Opportunity Sheffield around the New Pathways to Work initiative that is looking at economically inactive adults to see whether or not there is a chance to make some connections through to parents as part of this. If we're inviting employers into schools to talk to young people, can we invite parents into? Can we offer those connections and pathways to the adults in the same way that we're offering that to young people too. So it's definitely something that we're exploring, but we're not quite there yet.
I think some of the work of our service also reports through to the Economic Development Skills and Culture Committee. So as Cheryl just said, Opportunity Sheffield are a really close partner of ours. We work in tandem with them. We try to make sure that the links that we have with employers tally with the links that they've got, so we're not all knocking at the same doors. And I think Cheryl's right, we can then use that as a catalyst to reach parents, reach families in the broadest sense, and try and make all that work together. I think we were nearly overwhelmed by the event in the Winter Gardens as well. The appetite from employers to support this programme is fantastic. And in fact, one of the challenges is then harnessing that and making sure we've made the best of the opportunities that they're offering to us and to our schools. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I'll bring Councillor Mallinson in, but I've just got a question on the work experience. I think this is brilliant news, actually, because I think depending on whereabouts in the city you live will depend on your opportunities that you do get when it comes to work experience. And I know historically over recent years young people have been where work experience has been expected, young people and their families have been expected to find their own work experience placement, which can be really, really difficult if you're not connected, if you don't know people in the area where you might want to experience that to be able to progress. So I think what I would like to, not now, but I think what we would like a report back on is how we are engaging with employers. I understand we engage with them already, but taking somebody on work experience is slightly different at school age to having people come in an adulthood. So I'd like to have a bit of an update as progress is going on how successful we are being, how we're linking them into schools, what support we're giving to employers to understand issues around safeguarding and ensuring around children and young people being in their setting. So if we could have that come back at some point, whether that be in a briefing or I don't know if it needs to come to committee, but definitely in a briefing so we can track how that's going and how successful it is, because what we do want is lots of opportunities for all of our children across the city, no matter which part of the city that they live in. So I think that's really important. Thank you. Councillor Mallinson.
Thank you, and thanks for all the great work. It's just refreshing to see something that's so creative and vibrant, being done around careers. When I was a child, I had a careers interview with somebody who knew nothing about me and was absolutely pointless. When I was a teacher in the noughties, I had classes who went off for 2 weeks in year 10, and sometimes it was great, sometimes it was not at all, and it was a one-size-fits-all approach. My children in the teenies had nothing, absolutely nothing in terms of careers that I'm aware of. They may have had some talk which I wasn't aware of, I don't know. And then this is happening, which is brilliant. I'm just wondering, how is it funded? For start, I wasn't quite clear.
I can give you an official breakdown separately, but
Is
it's very
grants?
much a cocktail.
Is it grants or is it schools buying
It's
in?
a cocktail of investment through Careers and Enterprise Company, some match funding from Sheffield Council. We draw upon other funds like UK Shared Prosperity Fund, European Social Fund previously. So that's, as mentioned, about the importance as having a 5-year sustainability strategy. It's really in recognition that we are a little bit hand to mouth from a funding perspective.
Obviously that's a shame, obviously, but that's how it is, yeah. So it's not necessarily all schools, is it? I think there's a full list of secondary schools there. It's more than half, definitely. But
we support every secondary school, but we offer an enhanced package of support to the ones that were specifically listed under the Pride of Place arrangement.
When you go into schools, the people who are actually talking to the children, are they? Do you try and ensure the workforce is as diverse as possible, so that you're sort of engaging more easily with people from disadvantaged backgrounds and so on?
We recognise the value of employer encounters. but we also recognise that they are a lot more meaningful when they're delivered by somebody that has got a similar sort of background and lived experience as that person. So we have actively gone out to try and engage representatives from different communities, specifically focusing on disability and ethnicity, trying to so that we can try to connect some people, particularly. I think an alumni approach works really well with that, where people have gone to a school, have got an experience and an understanding of the community, is another way that we'd also match people to the different opportunities. But we are never short of a need for a more diverse group and representative of volunteers. And we've worked with the comms team to try and do a business-to-business call out to try and increase the amount of diversity in our volunteer pool.
Thank you. Just one very last thing. I haven't looked at your website and I'm pretended to be a school and to try and work out what to do, but hopefully, I know how busy schools are, hopefully it's really easy to use, which offers clear choices for schools, because what you don't want to do is ask a school to have to think about something and really, because they haven't got time, basically. And if there's some clear options, then it's always better. So hopefully that's how it is.
The schools, secondary schools, have to now ensure that they have an employed careers leader. So in the same way that a school would have a SENCO, they also have to have a careers leader. So they look at the overarching school strategy for careers. So we work with them to understand where an employer can offer an enhancement to that wider strategy and curriculum. And like I said, we created CITB as an umbrella brand to bring everything into one place, to make it absolutely easy, not just for educators, but for our employers too.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yeah, Councillor Bannister.
Yeah, why do you always do that to me? We've been involved in the work experience programme for many years, mostly in the conventional way where it's a week or 2 weeks. But something we have done, usually at special request, is more long-term stuff. I've got a kid at the moment, he's SEN, he comes to us 2 hours on a Wednesday. And that's an open-ended offer, which we take through. And we've found that has in many ways been a lot more effective because we've been able to tailor it more to the pupil. So just wondering if you managed to get many more employers to take on that sort of consideration rather than just being almost like a holiday. It's like, here's your child for 2 weeks, rather than actually getting them involved with the stuff and they become part of the actual setup, get to learn it a lot more. And it's more like having a real job because you're going to the same place, do the tasks to evolve through it.
Well, I think we might be making a case study out of your work experience model, because that absolutely fits with the new legislation that the government have announced. They're calling it modern work experience, and it's not just about providing one or 2 weeks of work experience. It's about providing workplace experiences from year 7 through to year 11, and that could be on a much more flexible scale than what we might traditionally see as work experience. So that's a lot for schools to get their heads around in terms of how they support young people to access those things, but also lots of work to do with employers too, to help them understand that there are different ways of doing that. I think from hybrid working, we've seen a lot of employers withdraw away from offering block placement, so actually this might lean into more employers being able to take on young people differently, but hopefully that'll be part of the packages of support that we'll be able to develop over this next academic year.
Well, we've just found it really good to actually bring them in as a proper member of the team. And over the years, we've had a couple of kids who were excluded from schools, and we're doing sort of partial college stuff, so they come to us for half day and they're for half day, and yeah, it just gives them more rounded experience rather than a taster session, which is what work experience often feels like. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bannister. That sounds like a fantastic idea. Thank you, everyone. So no more questions or comments on this item. So the recommendation is that we review and note the work of the See It, Be It campaign over the last 12 months and to take note of plans for further development and impact of the service for Sheffield's children and young people. And I'm really interested to watch the journey with regards to the work experience. I think that would be really good for us to have that back. That would be great. Thank you very much. Are we all in agreement? Yep. Thank you very much. So that brings us on now to page 93 of our agenda, agenda item number 11, which is the Sheffield Safe Task Force Programme extension for years 2025-26 and the change of grant funding mechanism from a section 14 to section 31. We've got Bridget Atkins and Stephen Betts presenting today. For anyone watching, we're just checking that our technical stuff's working. That's great, thank you very much. So if you'd like to take us through.
Good afternoon, Chair and committee members. I'm here with Stephen Betts to outline a proposal to change a funding mechanism. Learn Sheffield have received funding from the SAFE, based on the SAFE provision, which is support, attend, fulfil, exceed, in order to provide serious violence mentors in schools. They've received the funding for 3 years from DFE. They're one of 10 areas to receive it. Sheffield is one of 10 areas. The DFE recently offered a further year of extension of the funding, but based on the fact that Learn Sheffield have been receiving this through a section 14 agreement, which is grant funding direct to the organisation, they have suggested that it might provide more flexibility to that year's extension if actually the funding comes through the council through a section 31 agreement, which will give some more flexibility to how the money can be used. It gives a longevity to the funding, so through a section, it's all quite technical, apologies, through a section 14, it would have to be spent and allocated by the end of March next year. If the council receives it and then passports the money to Learn Sheffield to support the work, it can be taken through the whole academic year. So it just offers a bit more flexibility to Learn Sheffield in deploying the funding. The DFE has obviously offered the extension based on good delivery and positive outcomes to date. There is a steering group, which is a multi-agency steering group, obviously representing the schools with the mentors, but also including the serious violence unit and linked to safeguarding board as well. And obviously Stephen can outline some more detail about the programme if you require that. So it's just, the request today is that the council is accepting that we receive the funding on behalf of Learn Sheffield, that we commit to that agreement with DFE to receive the funding and obviously passport that money to Learn Sheffield and support them with the delivery of the programme.
Thank you, Bridget. I'm sure people will have got some questions. I think it would be a good idea for us to have, I know we've got the report for SAFE of the last 2 years. I think it would be good for people to understand what SAFE is and also how that links in with the broader stuff that we're doing across the city with regards to reducing youth violence as well. So how that links in, that would be really good. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I suppose the first thing to say is this is quite a technical request. It enables us to use the funding over a whole school year rather than try and cram it into 2 terms. So that part of it, I think, is relatively straightforward. I think in terms of the content, so SAFE was Home Office funded. They funded 10 areas. Learn Sheffield was the lead organisation in Sheffield, and we've been running this for 3 years. Essentially, what we're talking about here is funding mentorship for over 500 children a year for the last 3 years. Up until now, it's been quite tight in terms of you have to work in certain year groups. You know, there's limitations on how innovative you can be. But over those 3 years, and you'll hopefully have seen it from the kind of depth of the reporting, there's been a lot of learning about what works, but also what works for which young people. So essentially what we're talking about here is mentorship in school, not coming away from school, but in school. And it's been for about 500, more than 500 children each year for the past 3 years. It'll be slightly less children next year because the funding is at 70%, but it's worth saying that 70% of this funding is still just over £1 million. So this is a really good news story for Sheffield. In terms of how it connects into sort of wider agendas, it doesn't automatically do that, but in reality it does, because the colleagues who've been working on this are often the same colleagues who've been working on other pieces of work. So some of you might have attended the knife crime briefings that we've been running last week about a new resource around best practice in relation to knife crime. That doesn't line up exactly with this, it's a different thing, but the learning behind one and the learning behind the other, and the colleagues who are involved in that and the expertise that's been grown obviously impacts across both. The most exciting part of the extension, I would say, is it gives us a year to try and make this more sustainable. The challenge with this kind of project is, you know, it's been £1.3 million a year for 3 years, so significant amount of money, particularly at a time when there's not, you know, lots of money around for projects. But obviously what tends to happen is that carries on while the funding is there, and then when the funding disappears, it's very hard for schools to maintain it, and particularly at this point, as colleagues have alluded to earlier in the session, at a point when school budgets are extremely difficult, it's unlikely, I think, that people will be able to pick up that £1 million a year of slack to continue it. What we're trying to do with our extra year is do more of the same. So we'll probably do maybe 300 or so young people with mentors, but also use some of the funding to trial some other projects. So for example, we now have the freedom, we think, we have to run it past the DFE, so, you know, watch this space. But we think we have the freedom, for example, to do a project around transition. I'd be really interested to see what happens if we were to provide mentors for a small number of young people that started next year in year 6 and stayed with them through the summer and into year 7, in terms of some of those young people who are most at risk of struggling to maintain that secondary provision once they get there. So we've got the opportunity here to try some things and prove some concepts, and obviously continue to build on what we've done. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you, Stephen. I just think it might, if we can try and explain how we identify the young people that we're working with, I think that's really important as well.
So I think we were unusual in this regard. So we did two things which I don't think the other task forces did in the same way. So firstly, we put in place a framework and we recruited local providers. So all of our provision is local organisations. So this funding, this expertise and so on has grown within Sheffield. So it's organisations like Unravel and those kind of organisations, Gold Digger, for example, who have done good work in the city for a long time, but this has been an opportunity to help them to grow and to build that resource within the city. In terms of the pupils, we basically created a prediction model. So obviously you can't use the prediction model to identify young people, that's not appropriate, but you can use a prediction model to say, okay, if we have got 550 places, where do the 550 young people with the greatest risk from what the data tells us, where do they go to school? And you can then use that as a method for allocating the places to schools. So schools got more places or less places based on that. Obviously we can't share the names of the young people or the data work because that would be predictive and not appropriate, but we can use it as a mechanism to make sure we're, to the best of our ability, distributing the money, you know, in a way that's equitable to need, essentially.
Thank you, Stephen. Councillor Mallington.
Yeah, just looking through it, you mentioned a couple of names there which I was going to ask you about. There's 5 elements listed, or 5 maybe providers. There's Unravel, Adventure Expeditions, Sheffield Wednesday, Gold Digger and Westfield. So do they all have access to all of them? Is there a choice made? How does that work? And what maybe they do as well, sorry.
So we effectively, we've run an options process each year. So schools have been told how many places that they've got. Sometimes the number of places makes a difference to what's possible. So, for example, Adventure Expeditions, which is essentially kind of team building and social skill activity out in the Peak District, works on a metric of 10. You know, so they come, they pick up 10 young people, they go off and they do the work away from school. So clearly, if you've only got 4 places or 5 places, that's not available to everybody. But effectively, we've within that, we've run an options process, and then schools have said, you know, we would like so many of this place and so many of this type. And what we've found over the 3 years is you know, clearly we'll go forward with those providers who've kind of delivered the best results, but actually it's more subtle than that. It's also about certain types of provision being more appropriate for youngsters with, you know, certain types of needs. So some of those providers are more therapeutic in the nature of what they do. Some of them are one-to-one. Some of them prefer to work with small groups. Some of them are obviously more outward bound type things. So what we're finding and what the schools have got very good at is understanding not just what they'd like, but for which young people this might work better or something else might.
That's very helpful. Just one more question, one thing to say. The question is, in part of the report it talks about attendance worsening across the year for both the control, and I'm really pleased you did a control group, you know, it's good to get good data, controlled group, and who presumably aren't quite as challenging maybe as the, okay, yeah, okay, and the actual youngsters who you're supporting, and both attendance goes down, but the ones you're supporting who maybe are more challenging actually goes down by half the other ones, which is really good to see. Why do they all go down though 3 years? Is it because they get tired of being in school or something?
No, there are two factors to it. So firstly, attendance has got worse post-COVID. So in terms of kind of that, you know, attendance of the whole cohort has worsened. The other factor though is specific to this age group. So in secondary, by and large, the best attendance is in year 7, it worsens in year 8, it worsens in year 9. So if you are, and also within the year, generally, attendance is better in the autumn, less good in the, you know, and so on. So if you're tracking across a year 8 or a year 9 cohort, or if you're comparing between year 8 and year 9, actually the default is that attendance gets worse. Hence the need for a control group in order to understand are the young people who are experiencing this doing better or worse than they might do if they didn't, essentially. In terms of the control group, we use the same mechanism that we'd use for identification. So I think it probably is true that the control group would be probably a slightly less challenged cohort, but it would only be slight. In fairness, it would only be slightly. I know you've offered me the chance to point out that that's a positive, but in reality, it is only slightly, because we're probably talking about the difference between, you know, the 350th pupil in that list and the 600th pupil in that list out of 78,000. So it's pretty similar.
Finally, just to say, I'm really pleased that you're thinking of the longer term and legacy in a sense, because unfortunately, as all these things we've heard about today, funding is rocky and always, you know, uncertain. So you know, thanks very much for that work on that.
Thank you, Councillor Habe.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. On page 123, you've mentioned in the report some may have unidentified needs such as speech and language difficulties, and these can mean they find learning difficult. At what point do you think that maybe it isn't mentorship that these young people need if they've been identified as needing mentorship? And at what point do you realise they may need extra support where that's special educational needs, and to not keep them in there and direct them or signpost them to the right services? Because a lot of times things like this may take the crucial help that children need away and diagnose it as a completely different problem.
Thank you. I agree with that risk as being something to look at. I think generally the answer to that is that the school is making that decision. So this isn't disconnected from, you know, it's not piloted in and disconnected from the school. The school is making the decision about how to use this additional resource for its young people. I think that in this space, and we're obviously going to talk about this more, aren't we, in the next item, but in this space, as with the conversation about AP, a lot of things function as a kind of shadow sense system, don't they, in terms of needs that pop up in different places but actually originate back in terms of an unmet need. So I definitely agree with the sort of principle underneath your question. I think in this particular case, there probably hasn't been much opportunity cost, because I don't think doing these things are detrimental to it, if that makes sense. I don't think they're missing out on an alternative, if that makes sense. I think what we've got to do is get the range of alternatives to be better, would be my answer.
Thank you, Stephen. I agree, but I also disagree to an extent in terms of it is complementary in terms of support, but also schools try their best, we know, especially in Sheffield, to support as many children as possible. They do get it wrong sometimes. So do these mentors have a method or training where they can spot and think, oh, maybe this child hasn't been identified, and then you can reflect that back to the teacher?
Yes, so the way that the programme works is there are kind of regular contacts between the school. The school has a champion, essentially. The champion liaises with the settings. But also there's, in the first 3 years, there's been quite a big amount of quality assurance baked into it. So in addition to that also, we've visited schools, we've kind of asked those questions and fed that back into the task force that's made the decisions, but also into the kind of wider conversation. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Whittaker.
Just a quick question. Do all schools have access to this?
Yes, so it was all schools with pupils in sort of year 7, 8, 9, essentially. It may be in the extension that we narrow that slightly in terms of we'll need to think about how that works in terms of how you apply the model at 70%. And also we want to sort of learn from the first 3 years, and some of that is about, you know, the engagement of the school and the way that the school kind of, you know, grabs it and uses it a little bit. So it may change slightly, but up to this point it's been open access to all mainstream and special secondary schools. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Bashra.
Just following on from that, is it the schools, so when this is obviously made aware that there's this initiative and the support available, so is it down to the schools then, if they feel they need it, they then get in touch with yourself, or how does that work from there?
I just need to add something to what I said there, but I'll do yours at the same time if that's okay. So the way that the Safe Task Force is run is it's organised as a task force. So there are fairly clear guidelines from the DFE about how it has to be organised and supervised. The way that we did it in Sheffield was we made sure that the 13, I think it was originally, secondary colleagues who were on that task force actually represented, you know, virtually all of the schools in the city because of academisation and so on. We also used the secondary head teacher partnership as our kind of reference group. We talked about it in primary partnership and special as well, but particularly the secondary partnership. So everybody was very much aware of it. The slight amendment I need to make to my last answer is obviously on that way of identifying the pupils. If you were not to have any pupils in the 550 or whatever, then you wouldn't get any places. And there will have been 2 or 3 schools each time that applied to. Yeah, so I should have said that as well. Thank you.
Yeah, so basically the schools then approach you, just that bit in terms of, they're already aware and everything. So how do schools approach? So, you know, some schools might not approach. So it's just knowing if they're aware, do they approach?
Yes, sorry, I didn't answer that part, did I? So we approach the schools. I mean, there are things that they then have to do in terms of, you know, filling in forms or applying or whatever. But we're pretty persistent. There are no schools who haven't had places because they didn't notice it. That couldn't happen because of the and that's, in fairness, that's easier when it's largely secondary because you're talking about a group of 30-something schools rather than 130-something schools. But yeah, okay.
Thank you. Any more questions or comments on this item? No? Okay, so the recommendation for this item is that we accept the DFE grant for safe provision of £1.054 million for 2025-26, that we become the accountable body to accept the grant from the DFE and third-party liabilities on behalf of Learn Sheffield, and to agree a grant payment of up to the total value of the grant to Learn Sheffield. Are we all in agreement? Yeah. Thank you very much. So now we move on to the next item, which is item number 12, which is the Send Manifesto. Can't wait, this is really good stuff. And it's Stephen, you'll stay where you are, and Bethan, I believe you're joining us as well. Thank you. Oh, good, Anthony's coming along. So we've also got Anthony and Meredith. Are you joining as well? Oh, do we need more chairs? Okay. Thank you. Okay. So if you could just, some of you have not got name tags, so if you could, when you speak, if you could just introduce yourselves for the benefit of members and those watching. Thank you. So Stephen and colleagues, over to you.
Okay, so we shared some papers in advance and we've got a couple of slides, I promise not too many, to talk about today. The paper effectively had three parts to it. So it set out the background to this piece of work. It gave you the manifesto itself, which is the second part of the document, and then it provided an update on the building blocks that have kind of taken part. What we're going to try to do in the slides today is just quickly touch on that overview and that kind of core analysis and a couple of examples of those building blocks. But also what we'd like to give you today is a sense of next steps and what's coming, when it's coming, and what it will contain, essentially, is what we want to try and do today. This is the Chris Whitty bit, isn't it? Can I have the next slide, please? Shall I start talking and then we'll go from there? So the second slide effectively just sets out what's been involved in this piece of work. And there's a bit of an apology in this because there are some colleagues who will have seen some of this before on Health and Wellbeing Board and other places. And so I've tried to kind of do a mixture of covering that quickly, but also talking about other things. So first thing to say here, Learn Sheffield was commissioned by the City Council on behalf of the local area SEND partnership to develop a new strategy in relation to SEND and inclusion. The piece of work has been known kind of colloquially as the SEND Manifesto and started in September. The significant things about the piece of work are kind of picked up on the first slide there. So first of all, this is definitely strategy and delivery in parallel. So we have the approach that we've taken, and we'll come on to this again later on, the approach that we've taken is to develop the strategy, but at the same time, work on the building blocks that will be key to the delivery later on. So it has been both parts together. Secondly, and I can't stress this strongly enough, and I have to say this is where the kind of line of people is very helpful, I think. We can only make progress in this space with a genuine joint accountability, a shared accountability between education, health and care and the local authority. It's absolutely key to this piece of work that shared approach across all parts of the SEND system is in place. And I suppose you have the kind of living embodiment of that, here in terms of colleagues from the ICB and from the council and so on. And the sort of five key partner groups in this space have been the City Council, the Children's Hospital, the Integrated Care Board, Learn Sheffield and Sheffield Parent Carer Forum. They've been the kind of five core kind of organisations involved. So we developed the manifesto. The manifesto is very much predicated on the idea that we have to do two things in parallel and that they are interconnected. So we have to try and improve the SEND system, we have to make the SEND system more effective, and we have to meet the needs of young people with additional needs in a better way than we have done. But we also need to do those things over time that will mean that less young people require something additional and different, or that their needs are met at an earlier point and in a more effective way. So we've taken a building blocks approach, and as it says on there, the manifesto will inform the strategy from September. I won't do this again, I promise. I've done this about 11 times over the past year, but I pretty much always include the Harry Burns TED Talk. So if you've got 16 minutes to spare and you want to understand why wellness is more than just the absence of illness, which is a really key point in our approach, then that's the best 16 minutes you can spend. So please do click on that and have a look.
don't need to do it now, do we?
No, we're not doing it now.
No,
Don't do it now. Sorry. Apologies. Yes, that wasn't me teeing up. I'll have a rest for 16 minutes while you all listen. Yeah, apologies. Yeah. I know, I'm really sorry. Yeah. Okay, so the first time the senior leader group came together, we did actually stop and everybody watched it, which was quite entertaining. Okay, so the core analysis that sits underneath this. So children's experiences and outcomes are the product of our collective actions. So it isn't okay for some parts of the SEND system to be brilliant and some parts to not be. The young person's experience as they go through will be dependent on all of those parts of the SEND system being effective. So back to we need to have a shared accountability, but also quality is really important in this space. Small problems become big problems. We see that in so many different aspects of the SEND system, but the conversation we had a lot in the early part of the year is that waiting isn't a neutral activity. So if we have been referred and we're waiting, we aren't in some kind of stasis. We're going to school every day, we're perhaps not succeeding as well as we might do, we're probably having negative experiences. Small problems become big problems. So we often talk across all manner of public service, don't we, about the need to intervene early, but in this case it's absolutely a kind of core principle of the work. There is something about growing up having changed and we haven't really kept up, and we see that in a lot of different aspects, but you mentioned speech and language earlier on. If we look at the kind of some of the patterns of behaviours around speech and language, young people who are growing up now have a very different experience to language and the way they access language and all of the technology that's involved, and we need to be kind of sharp to that. We work in SEND in an almost totally reactive paradigm, so a big part of this is about trying to intervene earlier, but also in a more sort of long-term and connected way. It's about putting in things that are not reactive, but actually are looking ahead to where we need to be. We don't generally, I think it's fair to say, in Sheffield in this space, or we haven't historically had good ways of developing and mobilising the forms of capital that you need for transformation. So we would draw on that on the work of David Hargreaves, which is not recent work, it goes back quite a long way, but thinking about the need for organisational capital, social capital, intellectual capital and resource capital, and we have to grow those things. Those things won't just happen on their own, they won't just flourish. We have to actually strategically think about how are the things that we're doing going to lead to us knowing more, us being better at getting stuff done, us being more able to work and trust each other and work it collaboratively. And unreformed, I think it's fair to say the SEND system has, it was a bit of a cop-out really, the bracket. The SEND system has become unmanageable. There's a kind of zero-sum conversation that you can have about whether SEND will break the education system before it breaks the social care system or the health system. It doesn't really matter, does it? That's not. We have to do something different. If we do what we've done, we will get what we've got. And SEND is a significant barrier and issue across the whole country, and it is, that is particularly the case here in Sheffield. Thank you. So we're just going to mention a couple of the building blocks, and I apologise because this is a bit teasery, isn't it? We're doing kind of the interesting bit, and then we're moving on quite quickly. So the resource, there are 4 on the slide. We've just kept 2 of them in here with the images. So I'll talk about the first 2, and then we'll talk about the second 2. And Bethan's going to pick up the healthy child development work, which she's been leading on with Nick Whittaker. So around resource provision, this is just to give you a sense of the kind of work that's been happening, so you can sort of, when we talk about building blocks, you know what we're meaning. So resource provision, there are a lot of resourced provisions within the city. So that ranges from an integrated resource, which is a resource where young people are allocated a place. Those places are funded, and you'd find a number of integrated resource provisions around the city, through to what you might characterise as a kind of problem-solving hub within a school. So we've got a group of young people that might be quite a small group, or it might be a slightly bigger group of young people where their normal provision is not working for them, and so the school is trying to create provision that will work and meet those young people's needs. What there isn't in either of those places and all the way across in between those two places is anything that really sets out what quality looks like in a resource provision. We obviously had a good look around for it before we set about producing it, but in the absence of it, what we've done is created a set of quality standards that have been worked on with the special schools, the integrated resources, and then a wider group of colleagues from within the system. That happened over about 18 months prior to September. In September, we broadened that out to be relevant to all kinds of hubs, not just IRs. And over the year, it's been developed further. So what you now have in there, published in, I think it was in May, but it was certainly recently if it wasn't May, is a set of quality standards, a set of descriptors to explain what we mean by those things, and what you now also have is some guidance about if you were thinking about that thing in your setting, how would you know? What would you look at? What would you go? What would you actually do? What activities might you do to understand quality in those areas? So that's developed over the year. As part of our commission, we will by the end of the year have done 40 inquiry visits where those quality standards have been used sort of alongside the school. The school gets the feedback. We get the learning, the city-wide learning. So this is not weighing. This isn't us going and saying this one's a 1 and this one's a 2 and this one's a green or a whatever. This is us going and leaving the school with some clear sort of next steps and a better understanding, but also for us, it gives us a sense of what does quality look like across those provisions across the city, which I think is quite hard to get. And certainly you don't get, for example, through Ofsted inspections, because Ofsted inspections very rarely spend any significant time looking at those kind of resource provisions. We'll publish the learning from that at the end of the year and then build onto it next year. The SEND system features, I'll talk about in a little while. They're the three sets of statements that are in the middle of the manifesto. So it's that set of things. We've used that. I'll talk about it in a second. That's the basis of our analysis. So the analysis that you'll get in the strategy is our view of where we are against each of those things as a city, and that's our kind of collective view. Based on the work that we've done over the year, but particularly the work we've done in the SEND inquiry work that's happening at the moment and finishes a week on Friday to feed into the last part. And then last one from me, and then I'll pass over to Bethan. The picture on the screen is from a tool called SenseMaker. We are really excited about this. I wouldn't ask questions about it. I won't give you coherent answers. I'll do my best, but I won't. It's too hard for me. But it's basically a different tool that is looking at the experiences of, well, actually in this case, young people, but you could apply this to the wider population. We've got some public health funding for 2 years, so we're in the first year of 2, to use this for initially three purposes. So firstly, we're using it in relation to SEND. So we've got our first collecting of this going on now. We're about, I think, as I looked at the start of the week, I think we got about 40 pupil responses at the start of this week. We're working with a group of volunteer schools that are trying this with different young people in their settings. We've done 3 versions of that. So there is a parent one, parent and carer one, there is a professionals one, and there is a young people's version. A lot of this first stage is about accessibility. We need to learn how to make this accessible to the most possible young people. Filling in SenseMaker is not a GCSE. It doesn't need to be done under exam conditions. We can support young people, and we've got a whole raft of activity, including actually speech and language and occupational therapists who are doing really quite innovative things to try and capture the voice of young people whose voice we don't really get in the current situation. We are really excited about SenseMaker, and it might be a year from now that there's a really interesting conversation to have about that. We'll also use it with attendance, and the third thing we promised to do for the funding, says looking at his public health colleague, is we said that we would also feed back to the city as a whole about whether this might be a tool that opens up some interesting ways of understanding people's lived experience in a different way. So this is getting away from asking a Q&A type approach. This is getting into a space where someone shares their experience, a narrative, a story, can be captured in lots of different ways, and then they interpret their own story. That's what the various sliders and triangles and things are doing. So I don't propose we spend any time on it now. You'll capture the fear in my eyes as I said that. But if anyone is particularly interested in it, we are doing a whole raft of different activities. The organisation that are helping us with it is an organisation called the Cynefin Institute, which is based in Wales. And the colleague that we're working with is actually based in Denmark, so she's kind of flying over periodically. It's quite an exciting piece of work. Bethan, do you want to talk about public? Do you want to move on to the next slide, and then Bethan will talk about healthy child development?
Thank you. Just by way of introduction, I'm Bethan Plant, a Health Improvement Principal in the Public Health and Integrated Commissioning team here at Sheffield City Council. And I've been working with Stephen and Lynn Sheffield and a colleague, Nick Whittaker, on one of the building blocks for the manifesto, which is the Healthy Child Development model, which I'm going to talk you through, which is the model that you can see, the infographic that you can see on the screen. So the reason why we've been developing the Healthy Child Development model is because too many Sheffield children do not develop well and in a healthy way. They do not acquire and develop the assets that help them to be healthy and successful. One of the things that we've wanted to do through bringing together a range of professionals, they include NHS professionals from Sheffield Children's Hospital, including the child and adolescent mental health teams, the speech and language therapy teams, the occupational therapy teams, and the 0 to 19 health visiting and school nursing service. We've also worked with education colleagues, that's primary, secondary and special school education colleagues, and also Sheffield University and the Parent Carer Forum in Sheffield. In bringing these individuals together, what we've done through a series of writing and development days is create an holistic and connected description of healthy child development. You may wonder what on earth has that got to do with SEND. One of the fundamental aims of the actual model is for us to be able to understand and have a connected description of how children develop, the milestones, the ages and stages that children and young people develop, and that all those experts in those different organisations are following the model to assess need in the same way and at the same time as a child develops. The purpose of the infographic going forward, it's currently in a draft stage and we're consulting with colleagues and parents and carers and children and young people, is to first and foremost to provide a reference point so that in the city all our experts and professionals start to use it to assess need at the same age and the same time. That we use it to direct attention across the education, health and care system. It will enable us and support us to make more family and child-centred decisions about what to do differently and what to do better, and how as a system we need to work differently. I think for me, the key success of the model will be when it does work as an early warning system to help us identify children with increased likelihood of need, where they may need some additional support, and to enable us to provide that sooner and identify that need earlier. We want to influence the way that education, health and care services are commissioned, designed and delivered. So in the future we'll use this model in the city to ensure that services that we design and commission address the needs and the developmental stages at the right point in a child's life. And then finally, we want to use it to promote and provoke and lobby for city action to actually recognise the actual basic needs and the importance of those needs for the city. That is both for children's and professionals, but also for the city as a whole. Green spaces, access to parks, economy, levelling up and making sure that we address the health inequalities. So the model's got lots of different options and ways in which we can work with it. It's very much in its early stages, but it does form one of the building blocks of the manifesto that Stephen's been talking about.
Thank you, Bethan. Can I just ask a question on this? I will bring everyone in. But we've talked about healthy child development for over 20 years now. We've been well forever, because it's our bread and butter, isn't it? And we've worked together around healthy child development for over 20 years. And I'm just trying to understand what's different then about the measures, because we've had different iterations over the decades about how we measure healthy child development in the early years. And, you know, we used to have health visitors that used to do the developmental assessments at 3 months, 6 months, 7 months, and speech and all that sort of stuff. So I'm trying to understand what's gone awry. Is everyone not doing that anymore? And are the measures changing? Are they different to what they've always been for healthy child development? And is this more around setting out this really clearly and then ensuring that all partners are collaborating and using the same model, rather than each different sort of health, social care and education using a different tool? So there's twofold. Have the measures changed? Are we looking at different things? And is this about collaboration?
Which is deciding how to best respond. So, really good question. You and I know, Councillor Dale, that we've been working around healthy child development for a very long time. So the answer to the question is really what you covered in the second part. The measures haven't changed, but the problem that we find is that different experts and different professionals have to use different models to assess specific needs, and they do that very well and very effectively. Sheffield's got an amazing children's hospital, and both the education sector will do that in how they teach and assess how children are learning and developing. But what this model is aiming to do is, rather than that happen separately and those experts do that in isolation of each other, we need to collectively all come together to actually understand and learn what a classroom teacher looks for and what a speech and language therapist looks for and what a 0 to 19 health visitor looks for. So ages and stages questionnaires still completed by health visitors. Assessment will still be undertaken. The key difference is getting those professionals together to collectively agree and look at the evidence about what has the biggest impact earlier in a child's life, so that it's not waiting for somebody to reach a milestone before an assessment can be carried out. That is the new element of the model. The logistics of how that will all work and the impact on those different services is going to need a lot of consideration. But fundamentally, the model will do that. And there's also the culture change that needs to include within the different professions and organisations that will be taking it forward.
I think that's a really, really good answer. I think the only thing I would add is we've done this because it didn't exist. So there are elements that exist really strongly. So if you go to Birth to 5 Matters in terms of education and early years, this is done in a reasonably good level of detail. It pretty much doesn't exist in the Key Stage 1 or 2 curriculum. And when we look across colleagues in health and education, actually we're talking about different things. When we publish this, I think you'll also see a depth to this that is unusual. It is setting out what are those things that make the difference, but actually, what does that look like birth to 16 or possibly 18? It's up to 11 at the moment in the piece of work. It will move on further before the end of term. So what can I do as a young person at those different ages sequentially? What would an adult see? What does that look like? What does that feel like? And also, what are the things that I need to be able to flourish and to be able to grow? So it isn't just about a sort of tick list of things. It is a really deep piece of work, and it's an absent piece of work nationally. So we are kind of excited about that. How we use it, that's in our gift, isn't it? I would say.
Thank you, Stephen. Questions and comments? I think for some of us, I ask about this all the time, and for some of us have been on this committee for a while, so we've had iterations of this coming through. I think it might be worth getting this into a bigger briefing or a session for all members to understand where we're going. This has been brilliant, by the way, because it's been really clear for me where it is going. But I think when we go for the launch and the publication of the SEND manifesto and next steps, I think it might be important that we're all part of that as well. Yep, go for it, and then I'll bring everyone in. Thank you.
I just thought it would be useful to finish today with, because I don't think anybody will have seen this, but a sense of kind of how this is structured and what you'll see, basically. So we will publish this on the 2nd of July, so that's 3 weeks tomorrow. So if I look pale and my hair's even greyer than last time, you'll understand why. So we'll publish this on the 2nd of July. The way that we've structured it is it starts with the analysis. So it takes those descriptors of a local area partnership and our analysis collectively, our analysis of where we are against that. So that's our self-evaluation. The manifesto that you've read within the paper is the vision. That's the second part of this. And we've also decided to separately pull out of that some guiding principles. So those are things that are inherent in there. They're often mentioned in the manifesto, but it's those things that we think should be our guiding principles for a long time, not just in the within this piece of work. So it's things like, let's measure things that we value rather than valuing the things that we can measure. It's things like small problems become big problems. It's those kind of guiding sort of principles. What you'll then get is a set of priorities, which is effectively the kind of big themes. And for each of those priorities, it will set out what the issue is, which obviously will link to the analysis. It will set out what the goal is for 2030. So what does this aspect need to look like in 5 years' time? It will set out what we propose should happen in the first 12 to 18 months. So what's the first part? And then what are those initial actions? So that's how the priorities will be organised. And then, as it stands at the moment, the priorities are delivered through a series of work streams. So as we sit here today, and it's 3 weeks till we publish, it will change a little bit as the SEND inquiry work finishes. We have 5 priorities and we have 14 work streams. And all of those work streams are effectively the brief for how you would deliver those different aspects of the priorities. Some of the priorities have 1 work stream, some of the priorities have 3 or 4 work streams in terms of how that sets it out. The work streams are about delivery, so they set out what are we trying to achieve, and they pick up the delivery part of that, which is obviously those initial actions. The other part of the work streams is that what we're also trying to do in the work streams is describe really clearly how they connect together, because the challenge of doing this across a partnership of 5 partners is, one would imagine that some of those work streams will be led by the City Council, some will be led by the ICB or the Children's Hospital or Sheffield Parent Care Forum or Learn Sheffield. The danger of that is that even if the sum total of that is what we need, it could still go into silos, couldn't it? Because you've got people working in different spaces. So it's really important in those work streams that we set out really clearly how the work streams connect together, so that we can make sure that the delivery of each work stream connects where it needs to connect. I appreciate this will make a lot more sense when you're holding a document in 3 weeks' time. Last part of it will be the outcomes framework. So we will also create an outcomes framework to sit alongside this over an extended period of time. We want to develop that outcomes framework with a wider group. We would like to use an outcomes or a results-based accountability model. So back into the conversation about, let's measure what we value, and if there isn't a way to do that, let's think about what we would do and maybe do some new things. The guy in the TED talk at the beginning, Harry Burns, when he was in Scotland, started measuring how many children had a bedtime story. We could spend the rest of the afternoon discussing the efficacy of that, and whether that's a good idea and whether it's possible and whether it works, but you get the idea. We're looking here for an outcomes framework that genuinely can give us assurance about, are we making progress with the things that we want to make progress. We will bring you'll have heard a lot today of examples of us using local providers and local colleagues. We will bring some external expertise into that, because that's not a piece of work that we've got expertise in. That's it, I'm done.
Thank you, Stephen. Just on your last bit about the outcomes framework, I'm trying to understand where the accountability will be. So I understand that it's a really strong partnership and that people are working together, and I understand that there is friendly challenge and support across all partnerships. But with regards to the manifesto and subsequent strategies and plans, where is it being reported back to that we're either achieving or we're not achieving? I don't want to call it scrutiny, but how are we, as particularly as members, able to offer that challenge or to and get regular updates on outcomes over the next 5 years?
So priority 4, as we sit here now, is around quality performance intervention and improvement. So there'll be a lot of the work streams in that space will be where we make some of those decisions, and priority 5 is around governance. So those conversations will come. I don't think we should be shy about talking about scrutiny. This needs to be scrutinised. It needs, we need to be having an open and honest conversation about the outcomes that young people are receiving. So there isn't a definitive answer, because I think what needs to happen is we publish the proposal at the start of July. That then gives time for all of the different partners to have their conversations, to think about how this will impact on what they do, and then that will enable us to turn that into a strategy, and at that point we should be able to outline some of those things. It is proposing some quite different governance models, though. It's much more, we're proposing a more kind of participatory approach, and then we'll need to think about how it fits into existing structures like this one. Okay.
Thank you. Have we got any questions or comments for the team? Councillor Mallington and then Councillor Whittaker.
Yeah, thanks for all the immense amount of work. And as Councillor Dell was saying, this has been going for a very long time. I think part of the problem with the SEND crisis is, and I've said this many times, is the oppressive nature of the school system, the drive for academic results above all else, which just drives down the inclusive ability of schools, because they're just focused on or obsessed with results. And as you said, Ofsted don't really look much beyond that. So, that's not something we're going to change, but it is a problem. Plus, on top of that, the broken up school system, so that there's a myriad of employers. And that's where my real concern is in relation to this, because I really want, obviously this really needs to work, because the crisis keeps getting worse. So how are you engaging with school employers? Are you going to be getting to around all settings in Sheffield? Or isn't that an aim? Will there be some, I mean, I know you don't want a rating system, and I don't agree with that either, but will there be some sort of kite mark for schools? Because people love a badge, Okay, and I have got a question about sense makers, so don't panic. Just, it's this sort of yes or no. Is it some sort of questionnaire that kids fill out on a computer and then it spits out results, or how does it get its data, basically? And then is it sort of like an AI algorithm or something? That's what's in my mind, because it's a bit mysterious. And finally, what Councillor Dell was asking about in terms of the sort of network services, it sounds like we're trying to achieve what the EHCP process should have been achieving all along in terms of education, health, and care.
I'm happy to take any from you, I am.
Okay, on your first point, which I think is well made, you will have seen in the manifesto, we explicitly say we don't think we can wait for a change in the world around us. We have to work with what we have. I do think that it's fair to say that SEND and the implications of SEND are extremely challenging for all partners. They're certainly challenging for young people and families, but they're also challenging for schools and services, and also everyone. Although this doesn't immediately lead to a transformation in everybody's thinking, there are a lot of reasons to engage with this. In terms of it certainly isn't difficult to get people's attention around this. It's a burning platform for all concerned, really. So that's the kind of positive in that. If that can be a positive, that's the positive in that space. In terms of the all settings, I think that I've probably covered that in that space, but we have been talking about this with certainly the education sector, and obviously colleagues in other sectors have been, disseminating it as we've gone along. We did an update again last week at the start of this half term. And part of the reason we're publishing it on the 2nd is that on the 4th we've got our leader conference at Sheffield, so that will be, a fair proportion of leaders in the city in a room for a day, getting their head around this. So that's, I think that we should not be shy about having the aspiration that this is all children and all schools, not least because the systems and processes that we develop apply to all schools. So, that's the kind of process. You'll have gathered from the priority around quality, performance, intervention and improvement, that is consciously developing a model to be able to have those conversations about, what support can be offered, what challenge can be provided. I think we probably won't go down the route of weighing and measuring in the way that you also wouldn't like us to do. But that doesn't mean we can't have grown-up conversations about outcomes for young people and the experiences of young people. In terms of SenseMaker, so it is deliberately going away from a questionnaire. So you might be sharing an experience. The question might be quite open. It could be, tell us something about growing up in Sheffield. This is collecting it that sort of information at scale, and then using the questions that follow, which enable you to kind of assign significance to what you're saying. I'm struggling to go beyond that. I'm already I'm dipping on the edge there, aren't I? But essentially what it gives you is you've got a qualitative piece of information, and then you've got quantitative data. The quantitative data enables you to find where the significances are and the heat map is. But when you go back into it, you're able to look at the stories that people have told, the things that people have shared, which gets you into a space of being able to talk about, we would like more stories like this and less stories like this, which is obviously quite a productive space to be in. If it's as brilliant as we think it will be, it is very exciting, but we remain open to, we'll see. Yeah. And then lastly, around EHCPs, definitely yes. I nodded, I think, quite forcibly as you said that, but I think it's more than just the HCP process. I think it's also about how the graduated approach is used. So, the graduated approach, which is primarily an education concept, it's meant to be across, but it's primarily an education concept, has become a resource allocation model. If we talk about it truthfully, nationally, everywhere, it's meant to be a dialogic process. It's meant to be about discussion between parents, children, and the professionals that work with them. It's meant to be the process through which you pull in additional expertise when you need it, and it's more about that discussion about what will make the biggest difference for this young person now, rather than being just simply a process by which you jump through a series of hoops in order to get an outcome at the end. It needs to enable those processes to happen, but the thing itself needs to be much more dialogic. So yes, education and healthcare plans, but actually more the system around them as well. Okay.
Thank you, Stephen. I like how your colleagues are more or less left you to carry on with that by yourself.
I think deep down we know.
Yeah. Oh, right, okay. Next time then. Anybody got any more questions or comments for the team on this? I am really looking forward to... Oh, sorry, Councillor Whittaker.
It's really welcome to see this work. We talk about small problems becoming big problems, and I think a lot of the work that this committee's done over the years I've been on the committee, it brings home to us all how important it is to get things right in the early years. I've, up until very recently, been on the Health Scrutiny Subcommittee, and there was a working group from that on adult autism and ADHD. And the first meeting, there was people invited along, it was at the town hall, from all sorts of areas of life, working with adults with these issues, and also members of the public who'd had a late diagnosis in adulthood. And they spoke very candidly about their experience, so their experience at school, in the workplace, just in general, in society. And it made you feel very sad, really, really sad that their lives had gone on like this. And if they'd have had an early diagnosis when they were in primary school, how different their lives would be. And they knew that. And that came across as a sort of really sad fact. So I think it is important that we get early assessments done in primary school and that we make things as good as we can for those children. On a different note, I work with people who've been through the criminal justice system. They tend to be young men, and the amount of them that well, a few of them who have ended up with diagnosed assessments and being diagnosed when they were in prison. And again, that's a sad reflection that it's got to that stage where they've gone through the criminal justice system to be assessed and diagnosed with something like ADHD or autism or whatever, and how that's affected their lives. And their lives would probably been so different had they had that support. So any work that's done to this is really welcome and really important. So thank you.
Turns out that was the right question. My name is Anthony Gore, a GP in the city, clinical lead for children and young people in the Sheffield Place team of the ICB. And Councillor Whittaker is quite right, it's a tragedy. I mean, the system that we are in at the moment has been and continues to cause an immense amount of harm. And when we talk about a broken SEND system, the consequences are the ones that you describe. The details about the criminal justice system and people then being diagnosed within the system as having developmental language disorder or ADHD and the other things that cause young men in particular to have behavioural issues, that's not new, but is potentially going to get worse if we don't make the changes that we're planning on making. And as Stephen has said, we're making those changes in advance and hopefully in anticipation of policy changes nationally and hopefully more funding nationally and all those sorts of things. But we can't wait for those things. There are, within the pieces of work that are going on underneath and alongside the SEND manifesto, there are changes in place to try and address ways of diagnosis, trying to develop a different approach to diagnosing autism. Autism doesn't have any medical treatments. We should be doing all the right things for those young people anyway, irrespective of their diagnosis or lack of, because what they need should be identifiable whether they've got the diagnosis made officially or not. ADHD is slightly different because many, if not most, young people identified with ADHD will benefit from medical treatment with medication, and therefore some of the work streams that are being developed are about freeing up the specialists to make those diagnoses and get young people onto medication that allows them to concentrate and thrive at school and not be in the tragic situation that you describe. So we haven't got time today to go into everything that is going on, but we're very mindful of what you described, and that is what we're working on.
Thank you, Anthony. I think that might be something to bring to a member briefing for members of this committee so that we can understand that element of it as well, because it is quite high up the agenda as well, isn't it? Across the nation, it's not specific to Sheffield, but it would be really good if we could get an understanding of what is going on there. That would be brilliant. Thank you. Any more questions or comments on this? Councillor Bannister.
Yeah, just want to say it's really good to hear the joined-up thinking. In my experience of people who end up in the HCP, if you're in mainstream, the only letter they're interested is the E. And it's only when you're joining the rest of it that you can actually make the E bit work. And once you're into our specialist schools like the Next Academy, Cambridge, places like that, they ignore the education altogether to start with until they've fixed the rest of it. And there's maybe quite a lot of people we could maybe take out of these specialist settings by simply having mainstream have a better understanding of the building blocks that were, you know, you got to get the foundations and the education bit's the roof. So you can't really start at the top, can you? Thanks.
Thank you. Want to come back?
Yeah, education is the driver. you know, a young person with autism in particular, but even with ADHD or anything else, they're not ill. None of those things qualify as illnesses. Yeah, it may be a diagnosable condition in the case of something like ADHD that can be treated, but they're not walking around poorly, they're not ill. So yes, education is the driver. The existence of the healthcare in this space is purely to allow them to thrive in education and become essentially employable young people that are you know, functioning in society. And at the moment, that's where, as we discussed previously, we're letting down. But education is the driver. It starts with E.
Thank you. Any more comments or questions on this? I think this is exciting and a great opportunity for us to push this over the next year, coming years, and watch for the outcomes. And this is of a huge benefit to our children and their families in the city, and I think we'll hopefully start to fill people with confidence that we are actually, you know, we have a vision, we are ambitious, and we want to make sure that everyone gets what they need when they need it and not have to wait for such a long time. So the recommendations on this paper are to understand and note the case for change and the context for the development of the manifesto, to agree the approach for the development of the SEN manifesto, note the progress made to date in the development of the manifesto and the process being followed, and agree the time frame, the next steps, noting the design and development of the healthy child development model. Are we all in agreement? Fantastic, thank you. Thank you, everyone. So that brings us on to our final item on the agenda, item 13 on page 167, and this is permanent exclusions and 6-day provision. And we've got John coming to speak to us on this, thank you. And Pat.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. We're bringing this report to committee today to raise awareness with members of the high prevalence of permanent exclusions in the city. We want to outline the activity we're currently undertaking around that and to seek your support for the actions that we've identified. So, for the sake of brevity, I'm not going to go into the report in great detail because I know you've all read it, but we're greatly concerned by the steep rise in permanent exclusions in the city. Sheffield, since 2022, has sat above national statistical neighbours and core cities for permanent exclusions. And we're now at a stage where we have a delay in arranging 6-day provision for children, which is a statutory responsibility. We are putting action to that, but the need coming in is outstripping the provision that we have. So it feels like an urgent time for us to coordinate support and to seek your own support. We've identified 6 key strategic challenges in this space that we're looking to work on. There's been, through many years, an absence of a citywide strategy to prevent exclusions in the city. There's an insufficiency of high-quality AP provision for excluded children. There's inconsistent challenge to schools who are excluding children and accountability in that space. We've seen a disproportionate number of vulnerable children excluded. The reintegration rates from AP are particularly low from alternative provision. And we've also identified some weaknesses in our internal processes as a council and some of our teams. So I'll briefly outline some of the activity that's taking place to address these concerns and then ask for questions. We asked Learn Sheffield, we commissioned Learn Sheffield as a council to update a report they'd done in 2018 that looked at arrangements for alternative provision across the city. They updated that review and it reported in January 23, and the key recommendation was to bring together an AP task force for partners across the sector and leaders in the city to develop a citywide strategy around AP and exclusion prevention. That task force has now started and will report in the autumn. We've also established a challenge board, which Councillor Dale will be on with myself, to increase the level of scrutiny and grip we essentially have as a corporate body around permanent exclusions. We really feel we need to understand the cohort better. So we're doing a cohort analysis to understand the cohort. There's over 600 children have been permanently excluded from Sheffield schools over the last 5 years. So that's a huge, huge number. We need to understand their geography, we need to understand their ethnicity, we need to understand their SEND needs so that we can effectively get towards causation, what is driving this, but also into commissioning, effective commissioning, what is the provision that we need and how much of it do we need. So we're doing that. We're also looking at the amount, looking to grow and develop the amount of available high quality alternative provision that we do have in the city in a way that is focused on reintegration and positive outcomes, but also is locally available so children aren't having to travel across a high distance. An alternative provision that offers children an alternative curriculum. We've just heard at length that there's a high number of children in the city who need something additional and different too. We're looking to expand the reach of the Compass network, which I haven't gone into detail in the paper on, but would be happy to bring a briefing on. The Compass network is a set of schools in the southwest of the city that have collaborated together and almost become a cooperative around inclusive practice and the use of exclusion prevention. They've seen a massive reduction in their exclusion. We've resourced as a local authority the director of that network and have asked him to grow that network across the city, which he's beginning to do, and we think that's a key tenet of our strategy for prevention. And we're also looking to engage those MAT leaders, those senior leaders, both those who are already wanting to work with us and those maybe that we have need to develop a relationship with, and we've looked at the different ways we can engage MAT leaders across the city. So there is a lot of activity going on, but we're really concerned and we wanted to bring it to committee today for your oversight and input.
Thank you, John. Just, I know we have had a briefing on this, and as Councillor Whittaker and myself did point out that, it's a whole new team now, which is probably, so this is not any sort of comment about you not moving on, because I know work is happening now, but we had this conversation probably 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago at least, about, you know, the alternative provision quality assurance, the framework, and the need for the network. And I've just got a couple of comments, because in another meeting, I did ask the question, and I think you might have been in that meeting, John. When did we start to refer to exclusions and permanent exclusions rather than suspension and exclusion? Because the language of permanent exclusion is really quite, that kind of is the end of the road of permanent exclusion, sort of sends a message that you are permanently excluded from education. And actually, our young people should not be permanently excluded from education. They're just excluded from that school. So that's kind of one point. And can we, you know, and somebody from DFE said to me, that's not DFE language. This must be something that we've adopted in Sheffield or other cities. So I think that, I think I was in the Youth Justice Board, and there was somebody there from DFE who mentioned that that's actually not the language. So I think when it comes to young people and the way we speak to them about being permanently excluded from education, it just makes it a little bit harder than I think when we talk about reintegration. And I think the other thing, and I don't know how we got to this point, but historically, there used to be a RAP panel in Sheffield, which used to be secondary schools that head teachers would meet to discuss individual young people that were at risk of permanent exclusion, and there would be managed moves, and young people that would be excluded from school A could then be moved on to school B rather than being excluded permanently from education. And I'm hoping that from this report that is something that we are talking about, is that we are talking about when schools have gone to every measure they can to be able to support that young person in that setting, because we know that not all children fit in all settings and they all need different things, that those young people will be discussed and moved into other opportunities that is education. So it's not necessarily just about alternative curriculum, which I think we should be calling it, rather than provision, because I think people misunderstand alternative provision as well as being, well, we're just sending kids off to boxing clubs or we're just sending kids off to do arts and crafts. That's not what we're asking for. We need an alternative curriculum. Young people benefit hugely from going to those activities such as boxing and crafts, because it's the hooking, isn't it, that keeps them interested. But it's also the quality assurance around when we have placed our young people in that alternative curriculum, are they then able to work towards being reintegrated into mainstream, and what does that pathway look like? But if not, because not all children are, we've got some square pegs that don't fit in round holes and all that sort of stuff, but what does their academic attainment look like within those provisions? So yes, they have an alternative curriculum, but they still need to be progressing through whether some academia at level 1, level 2 and what have you. I don't know if that were a question or a comment. There were some questions in there around what this looks like, but it's one around the language and how we frame this differently, and then other stuff around the quality assurance and are schools talking about doing managed moves more often. I don't know who wants to come back on that.
Thank you, Councillor Dow. And language is absolutely key to the work we're doing here. It is important. DfE guidance around, because we used to call it suspensions, and we would have lots of different languages when we were at school. The guidance is exclusion is when you're removed from the role of a school and not allowed to return to that school. Suspension is a temporary measure, can be up to 15 days at once, rarely is 15 days at once, but it's a temporary measure. The word permanent exclusion has found its way into the lexicography of education. It's often described as PX and things like that, lots of words used around. The exclusion is only from that particular school. Legally, that child cannot go back to that individual school again. That doesn't mean they come back to go back to any other school, any mainstream school, any other schools can't make offers, so the language is quite key. Going back to the alternative provision and curriculum, again, language is quite important here because the alternative is the alternative to their day-to-day. The alternative is the adjustment. The word curriculum is their entitlement, is their diet of learning in the schools. The alternative should be the adjustment. The word provision, and it is important sometimes, the provision is often seen as the boxing club or something, which are very important aspects of this, which are part of a curriculum. Going back to belonging, and I think we should cover this within belonging, if we're going to do this, we embrace inclusive practice, and we're going to quality assure things. The best place to quality assure any of this in practice, in our opinion, is the schools themselves. They can quality assure their own provision. They've got quality assure arrangements through Ofsted and various other bodies, and we've talked about the involvement of that is where the strength of this is. However, there are often times where we do need something a bit additional and different. You talked about round pegs and square holes and things like that. So the quality assurance of that is, we're looking into that through the work of Learn Sheffield as well. But you are right, it's the language, coming back to the language, is absolutely crucial to this. Because the talk of permanent, the talk of crisis and things like that does conjure up a very, very different response. And also, I would say, a very different accountability in this space.
On that point, I'd happily move away from the phrase permanent exclusion. Yeah, it's absolutely not one
I think everyone's nodding, and I think we should set a precedent as leaders in this area to actually. It just makes it feel like we're kind of writing off young people at a very early age when we permanently exclude people from education. Education is a lifelong journey, and we all go on different routes. Some of us, including me, didn't stay in school, came back into education later on, and I think young people and their parents need to know that there are alternative routes. So if you're not coping over here, we don't need to permanently exclude you from education, and I think if we can agree to adopt a different terminology around that, that would be really useful, I think, if we make this successful.
Just on your second point, there are behaviour support panels that go on across the north, east and west of the city still, so there's still iterations of what you referred to previously as RAP panels. But I think there's a refreshing going on of that in the Compass network in particular. We used to run those panels as a local authority, and to some extent we still do. we've got a really interesting role in this space to get out of the way of the sector where they're finding solutions themselves and sort of, I suppose for want of a better phrase, bless what they're doing and be there in the background. And then in places where it's not happening, we have to be more dynamic to try to bring those alternatives around, because I think what happens in a managed move situation is it's about a head teacher finding alternatives and searching out every last alternative to a child being excluded, which is what absolutely should happen. That doesn't happen in a linear way across the whole of the city. In some areas it happens, permanent exclusion comes, exclusion, because we don't say that anymore. Exclusion comes sooner than it should do, and that's what we're trying to change.
I think that's the thing, and I know Councillor Mallinson will probably agree with me on this, around the fragmentation of the education system. It's all right having that happening in the north and northeast, but wherever a child lives, they should get the same opportunity and the same system. So if you live in that area, we've got people talking to each other. But if you live somewhere else, that's not happening, and it should be. Are we leading to make sure that you've said that it's where it's happening? Are people sharing good practice with colleagues across the city, so that actually what we should be having is a system working across the city for all of our children, no matter where they live? They should get the same experience, and so should their families.
Yeah, that's certainly what we're working towards, but I do think that we're working within a broken system as well. So we have the AP task force, work with Learn Sheffield, work with multi-academy trusts, work with local trusts and national trusts. That is all aimed towards that purpose. But are we achieving that yet? No, I don't think we are. I think we've got some way to go. And it's again not for us to prescribe as an LA how schools should do things, but we can have influence. It's a hearts and minds thing, really, and it's about building those relationships and growing that sense of shared accountability. Meredith?
So there is a real issue that we have in the city, and we probably need to do a briefing on this. But ethnicity does play a part in exclusion. Whether you have an EHCP or not does play a part in exclusion. And we know from our some analysis that there are some children who are on the waiting list for an assessment that also are excluded. So all of that in the round means that no, there isn't consistency, because there are a number of factors that have some kind of implication for your probability of being excluded. And we need to, I think, show that really clearly and have really clear conversations around that as well. And that's partly my role as strategic director to do that. But it's also as a system that we understand that and we can see that quite clearly.
Thank you. Can I, just before Pat comes in and then Councillor Whittaker, can I just say we need to extend the meeting by 15 minutes? Is that all right? It's the last item. I don't want to cut it off now, but we have reached the guillotine, so if we can just extend for 15 minutes, that we'll be out here for 1:45. Thank you. That's agreed. Reluctantly. And Councillor Whittaker and then Councillor Mallinson. So, Councillor Whittaker.
Just quickly, discussed at the same meeting that Councillor Dale was referring to a few years ago, we were also discussing that some head teachers would exclude pupils for something very minor, whereas other head teachers would work with that pupil and do more to try and prevent exclusion occurring. Is that still the case? And is there that inconsistency across even the same academies?
I'll happily go on record that no head teacher excludes easily and makes an easy decision to exclude any student. It is the most difficult decision a head teacher will make. Some will go to it easier than others, but it is never an easy decision. The schools have behaviour policies, and to be excluded from a school, you have to be in serious breach of the behaviour policy. So not only is it, you can't get excluded for forgetting your pen one day because it wouldn't be a serious breach of the school's behaviour policy. However, policies aren't and can't be aligned under the system we're in at the moment. and people's interpretations of serious breaches sometimes vary within that system, and sometimes the lengths that people go to avoid that situation will vary within that system. It's the term relatively minor would be disputed by any head teacher within that system. I think they wouldn't describe it as relatively minor. However, there is a degree of difference across not just the city, across the country.
Thank you. Councillor Mallington?
Thank you. I've got three questions. I'll be as quick as I can. Just about the round pegs and square holes. I think the round holes are getting tighter and tighter, which is part of the problem which I was alluding to in the previous agenda item. The links with the manifesto and the Sheffield Safe Task Force that we've already discussed, are there. A lot of these, well, any youngster who's excluded has clearly got special educational needs simply because their needs weren't able to be met in that setting. Therefore, something needs to be done to give them some special educational input. Is it worth you, working with Learn Sheffield, maybe you are already, because they are doing a lot of work overlapping in these other two areas at least, probably. And they also have maybe a better ear with the schools as well, because it is like herding educational cats, isn't it? So my first question is, can you work with Learn Sheffield? Hopefully the SEND Manifesto initiative will have an impact over time, because it's sort of educating the schools to be, it's pushing in a slightly different direction. My second question is, has the practice of off-rolling in year 10 and 11 ceased? Because that was a rather unpleasant thing that was going on not too long ago. And the final one is, really pleased to hear about the Compass Network, which is 7 secondary schools, according to the website. Again, with Learn Sheffield, can more be encouraged to join that and start being a bit more collegiate in their approach?
And yes, to Learn Sheffield, and actually the conversations that we're having is that alternative curriculum absolutely needs to be part of the SEND manifesto. There is such a huge overlap. So yes, simply.
Sorry, I was going to come back on the question around off-rolling, and Ofsted inspections take a very deep look at potential off-rolling within schools, and we've not seen any direct evidence of off-rolling. I've not had sight of direct evidence of off-rolling in our schools recently.
Okay, if I can just, I've got a few councillors, Councillor Healy and Councillor Bashrat that wants to just come in.
Thank you, Don, and thank you for all the work you've done on this. I just want to comment, following on Councillor Whittaker's comment about teachers' discretion. On the paper, it also shows that children from ethnic minority communities are overrepresented. They've been overrepresented for decades, which shows that it's still not being challenged as efficiently as it should be. But I don't think it's just this committee issue. This is a multi-departmental issue. It's a health issue. It's a housing issue. I'm curious to see the data between high-density social population housing and how many children get expelled. Are their needs being met in their house, Are they still on a waiting list? Are they on a priority? I think when we're dealing with exclusions, these conversations have been repeated. There's been multi-agency. There's a lack of connection with youth organisations in that community who directly speak to the parents, who see them as well, which you may already or may not already have these conversations with them. But when we're talking about exclusions, it's, like I said, it's a public health issue. I genuinely believe it's amongst every single committee needs to take their own, pick up their own weight with that. Children who are bad behaving doesn't just mean it's an educational issue or a special educational needs issue. It's a housing issue, 4 kids in a 1-bedroom house. Their needs are not being met. So how would you say this report addresses that issue? Community parks and leisures, what community they live in, infrastructure, transport, all these kind of things. I think it links, and you can kind of map out and draw an accurate representation of why they're being excluded, because a lot of the data has been replicated for over 20, 30, 40 years.
Just briefly, I know we're in a rush, but I just want to come in. I've raised this in another committee, Councillor Haby, actually, because the data that we do pull is around ethnicity and gender, basically. So whether that's looking in education and exclusions or whether that's looking at the criminal justice system. And the data that we do look at is rather othering. So it's more around, well, it's all them kids or all them kids. But what we've not really picked up on is the commonalities and the lived experience, and you've just hit the nail. It's really interesting that we're having the same conversations, because the data that we pull is very EDI data. Actually, what we need to be looking at is root causes. So is it housing conditions? Is it poverty? Is it, what other things is it? Because until we can actually identify the drivers, the causes, and, you know, then really we're in a position where we're just going to keep doing, like Stephen said earlier, we're just going to keep doing what we've always done. So it would be really interesting to find out how we, as an organisation, are looking, what other things are we looking for, but also what are other services looking at as well, and how we work more closely. So thank you for raising that today. I'll let officers come back in.
So I'm going to come back in. So I think if you can let us just take that away, and then we can have a conversation with the spokespeople, perhaps in about a fortnight, 3 weeks, because I've just got an idea of something we could perhaps do when you come back from holiday.
Thank you. Are you all right with that, Councillor Heary? And I think this is something we need to carry on a conversation on. So whilst I appreciate you're going to bring it back to the spokespeople, the trio, I think it's what we can discuss potentially in briefings as well. Broader, yeah, thank you. Are you all right with that? Is that okay? Councillor Bashra.
First of all, thank you, John, for sharing that, and I do welcome looking at alternative ways and reviewing all of this. And just adding on to what Maleki mentioned, again, I've been hearing this for quite some number of years. I go back to the belonging framework, which I really felt when that was introduced and when I heard about it, and I think a lot of this, it's actually, it addresses that, making sure that each child feels, you know, belonged, you know, within this education system. And I do agree with Dawn, the language is very important, because it just shuts off the education by just saying that. So I feel with everything in terms of the review that's being done and joining up all the services, because we've heard of fantastic work being done by the team within the education system today as well, and throughout the committees. And each time something comes up, it makes me feel, oh my God, you know, this is being put in, this is being... So it's an awareness for me as a counsellor when I'm going out and speaking to families or the schools, I feel, you know, I take that back and say, you know, this is in place, or sometimes people don't be aware. But I do feel, and I think, Dawn, you've already mentioned, how can we... because for families out there, you know, joining everything up, and with the work that you're doing now as well, we've had Sheffield doing some fantastic stuff as well, because all of it, if it's pulled all together and you're all communicating with each other, I think what Maleki has mentioned, tackling the root causes, because a lot of when we're out there working with the families, we see some of the deeper issues that if we dealt with those, then some of, when they come to the school stage, the exclusion, whatever, you can I'm not saying it's an easy task, it can very easily be seen that, you know, there is this alternative, and I'm quite pleased to hear that, you know, yourselves are looking at all these alternatives. But I think somewhere we need to have, you've already, I think, answered that in terms of a guideline for the schools or the health teachers, that across the city, these are the guidelines. But yet, I do agree with you that, you know, we shouldn't interfere with the school system and leave it to them, but there is a guideline. But then each case of each child should be dealt with individually based on their circumstances and the needs and the root causes, and then dealt with that. But I just feel there's somewhere we're not joining everything together.
Thank you, Councillor Bashra. I think that's the whole point of this report, isn't it? And I think it's really important that this keeps coming back. I think we need regular updates as where we're at with it so it doesn't drift. Because I think sometimes you're all busy doing and we're all busy over here doing something else. And I think sometimes it kind of, we lose the thread and it comes back probably too far down the road. So has anyone else got any more comments? I think what is really important as well, which we've not mentioned today, is and you have slightly, is the relationships with parents so that they understand the systems, which is really difficult if you live in one area and your children go to school in another. So I think if we can work on how we communicate effectively with parents on this as well, I think that's really, really good. Thank you. Any more comments or questions on this? Oh, no? So, the recommendation is that we take note of the issues outlined and that we support the next steps identified in the report. Are we all agreed? Thank you very much, everyone. That's agreed. Thank you. And I do believe that that brings us to the end of this first meeting of the municipal year. We've got some really exciting stuff to do this year. So, yeah, let's all get engaged. Brilliant. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.